Hi, thanks, Karna. So with that introduction, I guess all that's left for me is to say thank you for everyone who bothered to come. Anyways, the slides will be online and the webinar will be disseminated as well through the FAO AIMS channels. So without further ado, let's just get started. I hope everyone can hear me well. This presentation was born out of a conference we had in Nairobi, Kenya in June. And we were discussing open data and open science, and the colleagues from FAO, they really liked what we were doing here at ILRI with our DSpace platform, and they thought it would be nice if we would share. So indeed, we've been running DSpace for 5 or 6 years, so I just wanted to try to give some technical and organizational tips for people who are looking to start using DSpace or who have DSpaces and are looking for some new inspiration. And the overview of this presentation, I have about 20 minutes, I guess, so I'll keep an eye on the clock and try to keep to around 20 minutes, then we can have a discussion afterwards. But the main points I want to go over are why we as an institution use DSpace, how we use DSpace, and then talk about some specific examples and stumbling blocks that I find people having when they deploy DSpace. So that's in the organization, but also just some technical things and a bit of an insight into how we run DSpace technically. First of all, why we use DSpace, and this you may, if you are around in the ICT for Dev circles, you may have seen this FAIR acronym. I don't know who I borrowed it from first, but I like it because it kind of it embodies all of the things that we want with the open access movement and the open science, open data, open source, all that stuff. So DSpace helps us make information free. That is, in our institutional repository, we can keep full text publications, brochures, etc., without any subscriptions for the users, without any paywalls where you get only the abstract and then you have to pay for a subscription. Because DSpace is standards compliant, the information can be indexed and is thus accessible to the public without having to be on our ILRI's internet or anything. Anyone in the world can find it and access it. And we, as of a few years ago, started licensing all of our outputs. That is brochures and press releases and presentations and everything. We started licensing them as Creative Commons. So that means people can reuse them. People can take graphics or figures from the publications and translate them into other languages or use them in their own presentations or share the presentations, etc. And one of the kind of overarching philosophical themes is this idea of the carrot and the stick. So for at least for ILRI, we are in a position where a lot of our donors, the people who are giving us money to do research, are demanding that the results of science should be open. That is, the papers, the data, the code, everything should be open, accessible, and open. And so that's the legal kind of stick. Whereas we're on the hook, we have to. But really, I like to kind of appeal to people's sense of the moral imperative, the benefit to the broader community, and that's the carrot. And so I like, yeah, again, that's the nicer imperative. When people want to share and then they see the benefits of sharing, then they want to share more, and it's kind of contagious, etc. And that's why we use DSpace. And just to help you understand how we got to where we are now, this is a history of DSpace at ILRI. Well, first of all, like Karna said, I'm a computer scientist and a systems person. So everything I know about libraries and metadata and that sort of thing, institutional repositories, has just been from managing it and being around the content people for the last 5 or 6 years. So just bear with me. But I'm sure InMagic is something that many of you are familiar with. kind of an intranet-based management of physical libraries with cataloging and checking out and all of those sorts of things. And we had one too. And obviously, as the culture of the world started changing and stuff started becoming digital and global, and we started moving away from it. And in 2009, we launched Mahidar, which in Amharic means repository. It's in Amharic because that's one of the languages that is spoken in Ethiopia, where one of our principal centers is. And it's kind of cool to say Mahidar. It kind of gives us a sense of ownership to it. But as we started deploying this platform and it became successful, and we started getting buy-in from the scientists and the institutional stakeholders, we got more popular, and we ended up getting a lot more of the CGIAR research centers on board, sharing costs, scaling up, and we eventually rebranded it to be the CG Space, which is kind of a combination of CGIAR and DSpace, of course. And fast forward to today, we have 50,000 items almost, and we get about 200,000 hits per month. And I'm going to talk about some of the strategies we used to that. And right now, if you go to CG Space, it looks like this. This is a screenshot taken in the last few days with currently running DSpace 4.3 with the XML user interface and about 50,000 items. And as you can see, there are quite a number of communities in here which have thousands of records each. And we're going to talk about that. So more about how we use DSpace. I've been involved with DSpace for 6 years, but it wasn't until the last year or two that I really realized that our approach was anything special. Something that we did that our institutional content management or knowledge manager did was he stopped the practice of posting PDFs on, for example, the corporate website. We treat DSpace as the sole canonical source for all institutional outputs. And that's well and fine to say we're going to do this, but when you have 500 people in your institute and they're spread amongst 10 different countries, that's a very hard policy to stick to. But what he did was he lobbied and he got support from all the different departments, and he installed people into all of the departments. These were content people who knew about Twitter, they knew about taxonomies, they knew about hashtags and metadata standards and whatever, but they sat inside the groups with all of the scientists. So because of that, they knew when a new paper was accepted, or when there was a new conference that someone was presenting a presentation at, or when some group had a trip report or a press release or whatever. These people, these content people, would go to the Friday morning lab meetings, they would go to the retreats, etc., etc. They would drink at the coffee, the same coffee machine as the scientists. And so that's how we really got, we didn't get buy-in from the scientists at an early stage. We really got, we put people embedded in the groups, and we helped the process by having these people who were native to these groups getting all of the publications and stuff. And that's kind of the genius of our knowledge manager. He realized that people needed to be helped. They wouldn't see the value proposition all by themselves, because for them the only metric is getting the papers accepted into a high impact journal, for example. And then once we started getting all of these papers and brochures and whatever inside this well curated repository, we now directed all traffic to DSpace by having RSS feeds that people could come back to DSpace outputs and DSpace collections. And using open APIs that we're going to talk about later in DSpace, we build rich websites and integrations with DSpace. And so we don't have to duplicate the content. And that's something that maybe it didn't make sense until I said it out loud for myself, but you got to look at in your own institutes and your own organizations to see if you're doing this and duplicating content, because it's really a shame when Google gets confused and there's multiple copies and there's different versions and post print and preprint, and so we only have one copy, and we manage it in this canonical repository that is CGSpace. And one small note, for ILRI is a research institute, so we produce things like data sets and also videos, documentaries, etc. You can put those in DSpace, but I prefer not to. So because uploading a video into DSpace it's not very rich, So what we do is we upload the video to YouTube, to ILRI's YouTube channel, and then we make a metadata only accession into the DSpace, where maybe we have a collection in DSpace that is documentaries or news snippets or something, and we just link to them from DSpace. So that's a question people ask us a lot. Now, okay, right into the tips. We initially modeled this is something that when you're starting with with a blank slate, the sky's the limit with how you create your institutional repository. DSpace has hierarchies that are communities, sub-communities, and collections, and you insert items into collections. And it's very tempting to model the DSpace hierarchies after your organizational hierarchy. But we found that the organizational hierarchies can change. So this is a very important point here. Organizational hierarchies can change, of course. Mandates change, different departments come under other departments, some people leave, etc. So what we ended up doing is we generally organize this is a screenshot taken from ILRI's community on CGSpace right as of a few days ago. You can see mostly it's collections, but then a few sub-communities which are pretty institutional that don't change. But generally, we organize our repository by outputs now. So the output type, you can see, for example, the fact sheets and impact studies and publications, etc., posters. And the nice thing with DSpace is that once they're in these collections, you can map them to other collections for maybe other communities, other sub-communities, other collections, etc. So that's just some food for thought, something to think about, because we've been there and we've had the struggles. Organized by output type is hard to go wrong. Now, something that at the beginning of a DSpace deployment might not be, or if you're evaluating DSpace for your organization, might not be obvious at the get-go, but let me just say for you who are listening that DSpace comes out of the box with standard Dublin core. Those are the dc.identifier, dc.author, etc., etc. You probably know the DC, the standard Dublin core more than I do. And it's worth noting that there is no agravoc. There have been some attempts to integrate agravoc into DSpace, but it's a tricky problem. There's 22,000 words or 30,000 words in 22 languages. It's a tough problem. So if agravoc is something you absolutely need, I don't know what to tell you for DSpace right now, but we can talk about it later. And there might be some solutions on the horizon. But anyways, you can create custom controlled vocabularies. That is a limited set of vocabulary that means something to your institution. Like, for example, ILRI has a set of subjects that we use across all of our blog, which is or our content management system, which is Drupal powered, and yeah, so it's the same standard taxonomy that describes ILRI publications and all sorts of ILRI work. That's about a set of 25 vocabularies that we use, and you can add those. So, for example, we have added a custom arbitrary namespace called CG, and then under there we have subject.ilri, and we do a lot of stuff under that CG because it's the CGIR, and you can do whatever you want, and then eventually you can display those in the XML UI, and you can use them in the APIs. And when you're building applications around DSpace, you can use those fields. They're not standard. Google won't use them, but you can use them, and you can. That's just nice to know that you can use custom taxonomies if you need to, or custom controlled vocabularies. And for example, here you can see I've got the arrows there at the bottom. You can see a few that are not Dublin core. Those are things we've added, and they're printed on one example ILRI item page. The content or the country focus, the region focus, etc., etc. And here at the bottom you see the ILRI subjects, animal diseases, and that's standardized across the whole of our data set portal and our Drupal website, etc. Then something that we turned on in DSpace 4.0 and above is this discovery facets. And so this serves as a kind of motivator. If you're on DSpace 4 or below, you're on DSpace 3 or 1.8 or something, this is something that definitely is worth upgrading to DSpace 4 or 5. It gives you context-aware metadata summaries. So at the top level of CGSpace, if you browse CGSpace later, you'll see, for example, we have one field that says the status of an item, that is open access or limited access. For the whole repository, 50,000 items, you can see the status of our repository, basically. And that, then when you drill down to the ILRI community, you can see, for example, which types of outputs we use. Here's a couple examples. This is from the ILRI community. When you're browsing the ILRI community, you can see which type of outputs are popular, which years we published in, etc. And a side effect of that is that it helps you spot inconsistencies. So when we turned this feature on, we found that there are many different ways to spell open access in our publication or in our metadata accessions. So that's something that's good for admins. Bosses love that. It's good for content people like me who are kind of attentive to the data quality. You get to see how the quality of your data is. And so if you're on DSpace below DSpace 4, you definitely want to upgrade for that. And here is something that I just want to highlight with regards to the dissemination of the information. You need to investigate in search engine optimization. And I've ordered these in order of importance. One thing that you need to do for search engines, especially Google right now is the only one that really matters, to be honest. The only one that you need to go and do right now on your existing DSpace installation is turn on the generation of XML sitemaps. So there's a cron job. If you look in the DSpace manual, there's a background task that runs every night that will generate an XML sitemap. And once you have that, you have your ICT department or your content people, whoever manages your kind of web presence, you want to have them go and submit that sitemap to Google Webmaster Tools. Then you can control the indexing, see the stats, etc. And the rest of these you can come back to later, but you definitely want the first two there. That's very important. And let me show you what it looks like when you have that set up. Basically, with the sitemap, the search engine is not stumbling upon your content by randomly happening upon your website and clicking all the links. It's getting a structured representation of all of your content, so it can consume it. It can really consume it properly. And I put down here that it's kind of like drinking from the fire hose, because it's really just getting all of the information in a structured way, and that's what Google wants. It's going to get it in XML format, which is structured, and it can parse it properly. And this is what our sitemap for CGSpace looks like in the Google Webmaster Tools. You can see that we have submitted, or our sitemap lists 47,000 items, and Google has gone and consumed 47,000 of those items. And there's a little discrepancy there, but basically we're telling Google exactly where all of our items are and how to get them directly. So Again, if you have an existing DSpace and you're looking to increase your exposure, you need to sign up for Webmaster Tools, and you need to submit your sitemap and turn on that sitemap on the Google or the DSpace cron jobs. Here's what it looked like earlier this year when we submitted our sitemap. You can see in January 2015, I submitted the sitemap, and we had a pretty good presence in Google before, just because ILRI is pretty well known and whatever, but it was pretty haphazard and a bit random. Now, you can see this is like drinking from the fire hose. Google went and indexed for every single item. There's a PDF, there's a full metadata page, there are the item lists, etc. So that's why we have around 400 and something thousand entries in Google's indexes right now. And if you're serious about your institutional repository, this is something that's pretty important for the longevity of your data, or of your institutional repository, the items in your repository. DSpace comes out of the box with a integration to a service called Handle, and Handle will provide a prefix for you. You pay something like $250 for 3 or 4 years. It's not a lot for your institution, and then this prefix here identifies ILRI. 10568 identifies ILRI and the CG space institutional repository. Any item under there Handle knows that it belongs to ILRI's repository. And that's important because the website address for your institutional repository will change, or it can change when the organization changes, or the nature of the institutional repository can change, like when you bring on extra partners, etc. For example, ours changed from Mahidar to CG Space, but the prefixes stay the same, so none of those items are lost. And it's important to note that the default prefix is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So once you start getting serious, you need to actually register your for a handle prefix and set that up properly. And here you can see an example. This item is listing its dc.identifier.uri, and it lists the handle there. And brief run through of how to get data into DSpace. There are a couple APIs for doing this programmatically, but what we find is, aside from a few batch uploads, like when we migrate archive data from InMagic, it's basically just having these quote small army of editors embedded in all of our departments, and they're doing day-to-day submission manually. It is possible to do to harvest other repositories, for example, SharePoint and DSpace using OAI. I haven't had very good results with that. I'd prefer people to harvest us using OAI and to harvest us using REST, but again, those things are apparently possible. Your mileage may vary. I think it's better if it's your content and you own the system, then you might want to stick with the CSV uploads. But these are possible. The Sword is a simple web app for uploading data or something like that. I can't remember what it stands for. But these are technically possible. I would stick with the CSV upload and the day-to-day upload manually. However, getting data out is becoming much better. As of DSpace 5, there is now DSpace 4 and 5 now have a very good REST API. And if you don't know what that is, it doesn't matter. Your programmer people or your ICT people will know what that is. And when they hear the word REST, they'll be so excited. So REST can integrate with WordPress, with Drupal, with any number of modern content management systems, etc. And it will feed structured output in JSON or XML, which again, your programmers will be super excited to hear that if you're building applications that integrate with your content. And so that's basically all that's worth mentioning for getting data out of DSpace. Let me show you a few examples. This is a website by one of our projects, which you can visit it, ccafs.cgr.org. There are no PDFs or metadata hosted on this website. It strictly harvests one of our collections and displays the information here. So everything from the name of this particular publication on this website to the abstract and even the thumbnail even comes directly from DSpace. And this is a link to the bitstream, we call it, the PDF, directly on the CGSpace website. So this is kind of the shining example of building rich websites around DSpace APIs. But there are other ways you can do it. For example, ILRI's corporate website uses an RSS feed here on the left-hand side of the website to just show the latest ILRI outputs. And that's just an RSS feed. Every collection and every community on DSpace has a built-in RSS feed. And that's RSS is XML, and that's just gives you the latest 10 items, basically. And so we do that all over the place. We don't have to make separate accessions into all these other websites and write a blog post about it. We just, for example, on the side of this blog, we have the outputs for this project, and it's just an RSS feed. You can even see the icon there. And that's a really good way to not duplicate content by using these APIs that DSpace provides. And for the technical people in the audience, or maybe people who are listening later, a peek under the hood to our technology stack. DSpace, or our CGSpace, our CGSpace is running